My name's Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Field Report South America. We had a couple of big reports come out, the USDA report. We also have the CONAB report. That's what we're going to spend most of our time on today. The soybean market's under pressure. If you're a customer of mine, we've got a lot of work done on soybean sales. So if you're looking for more help on the grain marketing, reach out. The big stories that I wanted to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening to basis in Brazil. We're going to talk about the rains exchange rate, but we're going to spend the lion's share of our time talking about jumping into the weeds on the numbers on the CONAB report. Will there be adjustments to double crop corn acreage? How does the Brazil estimate compare to the US estimate? All that good stuff. So just kind of a rundown on news real quick, then we'll go to the CONAB reports. Updated stories or updates on things I mentioned last week. So one of the things that I had talked about was that we have customers in Paraguay that they really need rainfall. Talked to him on Tuesday, USDA report day. He said they got some life-saving rains on Monday and Tuesday. I've not talked to a single customer in South America that's expecting a smaller crop. Some of them are saying, hey, it's not perfect or it's a little late, but not necessarily a smaller crop. So boots on the ground, it doesn't look like that crop's going to be smaller. It's not, I'll put it this way, it's not hard. Some years it's hard for me to believe the official estimates. It's not necessarily hard for me to believe the official estimates. That's the one story. They got rainfall. Right now, rain is not a concern. They needed those rains. They got those rains pretty much widespread across South America. So weather's a little bit on the back burner. We're not even going to look at weather maps this week. Second story was basis. So we have seen, as the Chicago Board of Trade has softened, as it's come down, we have seen basis at the point of exports increase. The old crop basis is kind of basically stayed strong. But the new crop basis is what's really sensitive because farmers in Brazil are actually underpriced. They're typically farther along in their sales than they are currently. And the basis is kind of the litmus test. How high does the basis need to go to pull that grain out of farmers' hands? So there's two things. There's basis, and then the other thing down there that matters a lot for them is exchange rate. Exchange rate got a little bit of life, but it's kind of come back down. It's looking like their exchange rate their currency is going to devalue. It's looking like that might happen, and to the extent that that happens, that would make them more competitive on the export market. But that's just right. It's at the middle of a range, and it's been pressured for the last several weeks and months. If it were a story, we would be looking at charts from it for this week. I'm monitoring it, not a central story. Basis at the export basis for Brazil for harvest delivery on this last fall off on the Board of Trade price, it improved about 45 cents. It's about 25 over now, depending on which delivery period you look at and whatnot. So basis is improving, but it's not climbing as fast as the Board of Trade price is falling. And it's looking like to get back up to those basis levels, for example, the basis levels of what they were back in August for the export market. That's looking like a tall order. It might happen, but I think we would almost need the Board of Trade soybeans to fall even more, go down maybe under 10 in order to get that last move in basis. We'll see. We'll track it. Basis has improved 45 cents. There's evidence that there is a firm demand on this soybean market, but Brazilian soybeans are cheaper. Exports in the U.S. have lagged, so there's some cautionary tale as well. That's kind of a rundown and just catching up on last week's items. What I wanted to spend most of our time this week is just a deep dive into the CONAB numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and share a screen, and we're going to zero in on that. We're going to look at the numbers from CONAB. Let me pull that up real quick. All right, the first one, everybody knows there was you should, there has been a story about delayed planting in soybeans. And the natural question is, if I grab a marker here, let me get blue here. Will there be? You don't need to worry about learning Portuguese. We're looking at corn, and Brazil has 3 crops of corn, and you can kind of see the numbers. This is in the production, the estimated production. So you can kind of see how much each one. These are million metric tons. How much is produced in the first corn crop? How much is produced in the second corn crop? That's that massive one. That's the double crop corn. And then the third crop of corn, that's just in northern and northeastern Brazil. They have a little bit different growing season, so they call it a third crop because it's planted later. But that's teeny tiny. The real big one is double crop, and then a pretty significant one is what they call summer corn, which would be regular season corn. So what we need to understand about production, let's start with corn, and let's make corn yellow. Production last year was 144 million or 141 million metric tons. An estimated production of corn, that's all 3 categories of corn, is actually down. It's down to 138 million metric tons. Between the November and December reports, there's no big story. They're fairly similar. So Brazil is expected to produce less corn. Most of that comes, first crop corn is an increase, double crop corn is a decrease. The reason for that decrease, and we'll look at the area in a little bit, but part of that is just choosing to plant something else. So the first big headline is the CONAB, the official Brazilian agency, is expecting that there will be less corn produced this crop year than there was last crop year. Soybeans is a different story. Let me grab green for soybeans. Last year, Brazil produced 171 million metric tons according to CONAB, and this year they have them penciled in at 177. The USDA number is at 175 million metric tons. So CONAB is actually projecting an even bigger soybean crop than the USDA. That's kind of the alarm bells, so to speak. I did want to drill into acreage on corn, because this is an interesting number in my opinion. There's a bit of a story here. So if we look at the total hectares intended to plant to corn, you see that total hectares actually went up by a little bit, by about would that be almost 1 million hectares, right? So we actually have an increase in area planted, and that is for regular season corn. That's this first crop, that increased, and also double crop corn increased, although not as much, a little bit of increase in double crop corn. So the smaller corn crop is basically projecting, it's not saying there's a reduction to area or acreage planted. It's saying, listen, there was weather risk that delayed soybean planting, so we're still going to plant a lot of acres, but there's some risks associated with that planting. It basically, what I'm saying is it's a yield concern, not an acreage concern. What's interesting about that, and I actually believe this is bullish, is because there could still be an acreage story. You could have farmers that just say, I'm not risking planting double crop corn late. We missed the window and I'm not doing it. So there could still be first crop corn, that's in the ground. But double crop corn, there could still be an acreage adjustment. And I would not say that's more acreage unless we have something really bizarre on pricing that people really plant risky acres. But the upside on acreage for corn is basically locked in on whatever you have early season soybeans growing on. So we're somewhat capped on the upside, in my opinion, but we're not necessarily limited on the downside of acreage, because it could come time to plant corn if the price is weak and if the weather is shaky. Farmers might say, I'll plant less corn. So there could still be a bullish story on acreage for them down there on corn. And there absolutely could be a bullish story on yield. We're starting to give some signs of a little bit of bullishness, but there could, in my opinion, be even more bullishness for the corn. So that's something that I would definitely watch. As far as impact over pricing, I think the biggest story for soybeans will be how much pricing work farmers in Brazil will get done over the next, I'm going to say 2 months, but maybe we should be saying 1 month. But basically, those early harvested soybeans, is there going to be more forward pricing done? Is there going to be aggressive sales right off the combine? Because once you get into the lion's share of harvest, once you fill the bins, you got the lines of trucks, so we're talking probably March, April, it's going to be kind of a no-brainer, right? There's going to be a lot of soybeans out of Brazil. There's going to be pretty significant stories. Buyers have all the leverage, and it's going to, I'm afraid it's going to get a little bit ugly, at least for farmers in South America once that massive soybean crop hits the market. But over the next, does Chicago find support? How aggressive are farmers on forward pricing? Does basis improve? How much, wind in their sails can farmers in Brazil get shorter term? And also what will happen to exchange rate? So the farmer selling behavior in Brazil, I believe, is very likely the most important driving force of soybeans over the upcoming weeks. When it comes to corn pricing, we're kind of in no man's land where the U.S. crop is secured. There's the regular season risk of Argentina and Brazil, but that's the smaller part of the crop. The lion's share of the crop is a double crop, and we're only going to have weather risk for that. Maybe January, more likely that's February, March story. So we're a little bit down the road before we get weather risk. It's kind of a news vacuum for the corn, but there's always a new story. If you like this content, feel free to share the email, and there's a link that people can get signed up right in just at the bottom of the email. Or if you're looking for more help on how to navigate the grain markets, don't hesitate to book a time, and let's talk over it and see if it's a right fit for your operation. Hope you have a great weekend and great next week.